U.S. President Donald Trump has paused his country-specific tariffs on most countries for 90 days, just 13 hours after they were imposed. The rate on China, however, was raised to 125% following Beijing's fresh retaliation. Local stocks jumped around 6% on Thursday on the heels of the postponement of reciprocal tariffs. Trading had to be halted at one point in the morning, this time because of the surge. Liberal leader Lee Jae-myung has made official his presidential run, and so has former People Power Party chair Han Dong-hoon, as the party today unveiled the rules for its primary. It's April 10th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start with unexpected news of a 3-month pause in so-called U.S. reciprocal tariffs on most countries, less than 24 hours after they took effect. But that doesn't apply to China, against which the rate went up even higher in a tit-for-tat battle with Washington. Kim Bo-kyung reports.
In just 13 hours since the reciprocal tariffs for so-called worst offender countries took effect on Wednesday, U.S. President Donald Trump abruptly backed down on this set of tariffs for 90 days for all countries apart from China, which instead saw its tariffs raised to 125%. Trump's stunning reversal came through his social media just before 1:30 p.m. Wednesday, where he said Washington would pause higher targeted tariffs to more than 75 trading partners who reached out to negotiate with the U.S. rather than retaliated. He repeated his thoughts during an event with race car champions on the White House South Lawn.
I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate.
The decision means countries that would have faced reciprocal tariff rates on Wednesday, including South Korea, see rates go back down to the universal 10% rate. But for Beijing, which had retaliated to Trump's 104% tariffs by upping its tariff rate on U.S. goods to 84%, Trump raised tariffs on China yet again to now 125%. Products that aren't exempt under the trade deal, steel, aluminum, and autos, will still have a 25% tariff. When asked whether volatile bond markets persuaded him to pull back on his plan, Trump said he saw people were getting afraid.
The bond market right now is beautiful. But yeah, I saw last night where people were getting a little queasy. They were getting yippy, you know? They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid.
On this, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reportedly told the press at the White House that what people saw, the reciprocal tariffs that went in effect on Wednesday, was a ceiling, and now that they have a temporary floor. He added it would take some time for each country's tailor-made solutions. Meanwhile, for South Korea, the 90-day pause will likely serve as time to negotiate with the U.S. after the new administration launches in June. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Trade tensions between the world's two largest economies show little sign of dialing down any sooner. China's retaliatory tariffs of 84% on U.S. imports came into effect this afternoon, just hours after the U.S. decided to raise tariffs on China to 125%, as we just heard. Pei Yun-ji explains more.
China's countermeasures against the U.S. took effect at noon Beijing local time, after the Chinese government announced its decision to impose 84% additional tariffs on all American imports. The country had earlier vowed to fight to the end and said in a statement that the U.S. escalation of tariffs is a mistake upon mistake.
We will continue to take resolute and strong measures to safeguard our legitimate rights and interests.
In addition to the tariffs, China's Commerce Ministry announced that it had imposed export controls on 12 American companies, banning Chinese companies from supplying them with dual-use products with military and civilian applications. It also added 6 more U.S. firms to its unreliable entity list, which bans them from trading or making new investments in China. But China did leave room for dialogue with Washington. When asked about whether the two sides have started tariff negotiations, the Commerce Ministry said in a regular briefing on Thursday that it's open to talks, but stressed that this must be based on mutual respect and equality. The two countries have been going back and forth with tariffs since U.S. President Donald Trump returned to office earlier this year. In February, Trump imposed additional 10% tariffs on Chinese imports, and China hit back by imposing 15% tariffs on U.S. coal and LNG products. In March, Trump decided to double the levies on China to 20%, in which China retaliated by imposing 15% tariffs on key American farm products. Then last week, Trump unveiled an additional 34% tariff on all Chinese imports, and China hit back with reciprocal tariffs. Trump threatened to add another 50%, increasing the tariff rate to 104%. China immediately responded by increasing tariffs on American imports from 34% to 84%. And now, Trump has hit back China harder with tariffs of 125%, leading to retaliation from Beijing. As both countries refuse to back down, eyes are now on whether the two largest economies in the world will be able to reach a trade deal in the near future. 배은지, Arirang News.
And Korea is trying to make the most of the 90-day pause, using diplomatic channels and seeking areas of cooperation with Washington. Moon Hae-ryun has the latest.
Acting President and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo has ordered an all-out diplomatic push to respond to Washington's tariff moves, following the Trump administration's decision to temporarily suspend additional rates on reciprocal tariffs for key trade partners, including South Korea. During a virtual meeting on Wednesday with South Korea's ambassador to the United States, Cho Yeon-dong, and Minister for Trade, Chung In-kyo, Han stressed the need for swift and unified coordination with U.S. counterparts, the National Security Council, U.S. Trade Representative, and the U.S. Departments of State, Commerce, and Energy. He instructed the Korean embassy in Washington to strengthen communication with U.S. officials and ensure timely reporting back to Seoul, where all government ministries are treating the situation with the utmost seriousness. Ambassador Cho said U.S. officials reacted positively following Han's phone call with U.S. President Trump, expressing interest in deepening cooperation in trade, energy, and shipbuilding. Trade Minister Chung, who is currently in Washington, echoed that the tariff delay gives Korea a chance to minimize the economic fallout. However, he warned of potential spillover effects from steep U.S. tariffs on China, such as an influx of discounted Chinese goods into Korean and regional markets. Meanwhile, Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok also addressed the issue, stating on Wednesday that the 90-day deferral has eased some immediate pressure. In a meeting with financial envoys abroad, he pledged full support for Korean companies during this adjustment period and emphasized the need for clear messaging that Korea's economic and foreign policy remains steady despite this period of political transition. Officials noted that while China is responding forcefully to the U.S. tariffs, countries like Japan and Vietnam are prioritizing dialogue, highlighting the importance of tailored, proactive diplomacy in the weeks ahead. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
To delve into the U.S.-triggered trade turbulence, that's become increasingly hard to predict these days. Our correspondent Lee Soo-jin joins us in the studio. Soo-jin, first of all, what could have been the reasoning behind the U.S. President Trump pausing his new tariffs?
Right, so Trump's decision, like you said, to pause reciprocal tariffs on all nations except China has escalated Washington's trade conflict with Beijing. While Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said this 90-day pause was Trump's plan all along, experts say the economic and political pressure just became too much for the Trump administration. Let's take a listen.
I suppose the U.S. government knows well about this because customers of the U.S. are the great buyers. The domestic consumers of the U.S. have to pay heavy burden of unrealistic price hike, not to mention of short supply of daily necessities, which could spike political pressure.
After Trump announced his tariffs on April 2nd, the broad-based S&P 500 lost nearly $6 trillion in market value, and at the close on Tuesday was down 19% from its February 19 peak. And it's notable that Trump's tariffs exclude only China, with both countries now fully embarking on tit-for-tat retaliations. Here's what the Treasury Secretary said.
This was his strategy all along, and that you might even say that he goaded China into a bad position, and we are willing to cooperate with our allies and with our trading partners who did not retaliate. It wasn't.
The move ensures that nations such as the EU will not find common ground with China to unite against the U.S. Let's take a listen to what an expert said on this.
Anyway, tariff war always leads to loss at the end of the day. But I think the U.S. clearly has very pinpointed target against China. So I'm not sure if this strategical alliance with the Europe is going to really work.
But this pause does not mean problem solved. And tell us about how the stock markets responded after the postponement.
Sure, so while this pause has brought Korea temporary relief from the onslaught of steep tariffs, there's still existing tariffs in place that the country must continue to grapple with. The 10% baseline tariff that went into effect on Saturday remains in place, and the 25% duties on items such as automobiles and steel are not covered by the 90-day grace period. And starting May 3rd, a 25% tariff on auto parts will also go into effect. Here are some concerns.
Auto parts suppliers are facing significant disruption. Some subparts required for manufacturing are still being imported from Korea. So even if vehicle assembly happens locally, the impact of increased tariffs on imported car parts is still unavoidable.
But as of now, markets are seeing a recovery. A buy-side sidecar was triggered Thursday morning for the first time in over 8 months after the Kospi 200 futures jumped more than 5% from the previous session, coming just days after a sell-side sidecar was activated Monday, also for the first time in 8 months. A sidecar is activated when the Kospi 200 futures index rises or falls by 5% or more and stays there for at least a minute. A buy-side sidecar was also activated for the Kosdaq during morning trading for the first time since August last year, when the futures and the stock index each rose more than their 6% and 3% thresholds. The market rebound extended throughout the day, with the Kospi and Kosdaq indexes both closing up around 6%. This comes as Wall Street reacted positively to the news of Trump's 90-day tariff pause. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose more than 7% on Wednesday, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq soared over 12%.
What could be done during those 90 days?
Right, so like we saw earlier from our colleague, the Korean government is moving swiftly to strengthen communication with U.S. officials. Here are some key areas that Korea should also focus on during this time. Let's take a listen.
With the United States, not only trade and tariff, but also shipbuilding, LNG investment in Alaska gas pipe, and defense cost sharing are expected to be discussed comprehensively.
As one of the Trump administration's key energy priorities is fossil fuels, has repeatedly urged Korea to join the Alaska LNG project. In response, South Korea's foreign minister issued a research tender on Thursday to explore ways to expand U.S. oil and LNG imports. Shipbuilding, where Korea is a global leader, is also emerging as a key area of cooperation following Trump's executive order to rebuild the U.S. shipbuilding industry, citing national security and competition with China.
Right, we will continue to keep tabs on that. Thank you, Sujin.
Thank you for having me.
The government has imposed new sanctions on 1 vessel, 2 foreign companies, and 2 Chinese nationals for violating UN Security Council resolutions. The stateless ship Sunrise One, run by Hong Kong's Shangrui Shipping, was caught in South Korean waters last June after loading some 5,000 tons of North Korean iron ore, strictly banned under UN Resolution 2371. Russia's consul David owned the cargo, while 2 Chinese men operated the ship. Seoul says the move reaffirms its commitment to curbing Pyongyang's weapons development by cutting off illegal supply routes at sea. On the political front, the People Power Party has disclosed its partisan primary election plan. The first round of cutoffs will be based on the public opinion, aiming to better reflect their sentiment. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon has more.
The rules for the People Power Party's presidential primary are set. With over 10 contenders expected to vie for the nomination, there will be a series of cutoffs. But their biggest challenge, winning public support amid the fallout from President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment. That's why the first round of cutoffs to leave 4 contenders will be an open survey to all citizens, not just their registered members.
The decision to base the first round entirely on the general public was made in response to widespread calls for an open primary and greater weight on public sentiment. This ensures that candidates who align with the public's expectations can advance to the 4-way race.
As for the specific timeline, the first round of candidates will be finalized by April 16th. After 3 days of debates, the general public poll will leave 4 contenders. For the next few days, the 4 candidates will face the media and debate each other. The next cutoff survey starts on the 27th, and by the 29th, the remaining 2 will be decided through an open poll for 50% and eligible PPP electors for 50%, or registered PPP members who've paid for party membership at least once in the past year. If one of the 4 contenders receives more than 50% of the final votes here, he or she will be the final candidate. If not, on April 30th, a debate will be held between the 2 contenders. On May 3rd, the PPP will hold a convention and announce its candidate. Meanwhile, to prevent tactical voting in open polls where opposition supporters might boost a weaker PPP candidate, those who previously backed another are excluded from the survey sample. As for the race, the latest to enter is former PPP chair Han Dong-hoon. Speaking at the National Assembly, Han vowed to block what he called Lee Jae-myung's monstrous administration and says he wants a generational shift in politics.
I'm going to create a nation where the citizens come first, the middle class grows, and practicality beats ideology. With that in mind, I will make a change in politics, the era, and the generation.
Once the closest to President Yoon, Han broke ranks in early 2024 and even backed Yoon's impeachment. Because of this, he is expected to score high on the all-open voting tallies. Daegu Mayor Hong Jun-pyo is also likely a beneficiary, and his declaration is set to come next Monday. On the other hand, Yoon's close political ally Na Kyung-won also announced that she will declare her candidacy on Friday. Kim Moon-soo and An Chol-soo are among those that's declared candidacy already. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Former Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung, who stepped down on Wednesday, has announced his 3rd run for the nation's top office. In a video message on Thursday, Lee pledged dedication to the people in a new vision dubbed K Initiative that highlights Korea's ability to turn crisis into opportunity. He is expected to elaborate on this vision at the parliament on Friday. Other DP candidates are former lawmaker Kim Do-kwan and Governor of Gyeonggi-do Province Kim Dong-yeon, who earlier declared their intentions to run in the race. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party has tapped Park Bom-gye, a 4-term lawmaker, as its election committee chair and yet has to announce its partisan primary election plan. On the cultural front, an art museum here in Seoul is showcasing a beautiful collection of ancient paper fans that all have a unique story to share. Han Daeun has a glimpse.
A fan painting gifted by a Qing dynasty scholar to a celebrated Chosun literati painter Hong Yeon-ju. The delicate bamboo leaves invite viewers into the refined artistic exchanges of the era. Jiran Byung-bun by Chusa Kim Jong-hee, a towering figure of Chosun-era calligraphy and literati art, brings to life a graceful composition of orchid blossoms and mushrooms. Cho Hee-ryung's orchids whisper of changing times, casting light on the evolution of his artistic style.
Cho Hee-ryung's early orchid paintings were largely shaped by Chusa Kim Jong-hee, but later gave way to a more unrestrained style, reflecting the emotional weight of his exile.
A grand fan painting by Tanwon Kim Hong-do, Chosun's prominent painter renowned for his depictions of common people, with heartfelt praise from Kim's close mentor inscribed in the right corner, adds to the charm and warmth of this masterful work.
Rather than giving a plain fan, our ancestors made it special by adding their own paintings or calligraphy, turning it into a personalized gift.
The fan artworks of modern-era artists are filled with calligraphy and paintings, each brimming with stories and warm wishes for the recipient's good fortune. Titled Sonu Pungol, which translates to sharing a moonlit breeze with good friends, the exhibition features 55 fan artworks carefully curated from the Kansong Art Museum's collection. Among them, over 20 pieces will be unveiled to the public for the first time. The museum's first fan-themed exhibition in 50 years runs through May 25th, inviting visitors to discover the untold stories woven through every fold and brushstroke. Han Daeun, Arirang News.
Forest-grown ginseng, which is grown in nature from planted seeds, is known for its health benefits. Now, new research shows that extracts from Korean forest-grown ginseng could be used for vaccines. Cha Yun-kyung has more.
Forest-grown ginseng is grown in nature without artificial cultivation after its seeds are planted on the mountainside. The Korea Forest Service has designated forest-grown ginseng as a special management forestry product since 2011 to improve international competitiveness through systematic management and research. Korean forest-grown ginseng gained global attention in 2014 when research showed it has a better antioxidant effect than Chinese ginseng or American ginseng. And further research revealed that forest-grown ginseng extracts could be used for vaccines.
We have found that protein which degrades pathogenic organisms and substances which stimulate immune reactions became highly activated as the concentration of ginseng extract got denser.
For the vaccine to be effective, enough substances should be made to stimulate an immune reaction, and protein that degrades pathogenic organisms should be activated. Researchers found that the protein becomes highly activated as the concentration of ginseng extract increases. Korea Forest Service is planning on applying for a patent in the first half of this year. However, it remains to be seen whether the productivity and utilization value of ginseng extract is suitable enough for vaccines. Cha Yun-kyung, Arirang News.
you had some time this afternoon to soak up that beautiful sunshine. Tomorrow, we can look forward to an even nicer and warmer afternoon. Then we're expecting a dynamic weather shift over the weekend with a spring storm expected with a big chill on Sunday. Meanwhile, Seoul and the surrounding regions remain dusty all day tomorrow. The Chungcheongdo provinces could get dusty at times. The morning starts off similar to today in most parts at 8 degrees Celsius in the capital and Daegu. Gyeongju will be tad cooler at 6 degrees. Then the afternoon highs will rise rapidly and it could feel more like mid-May, hovering around 25 degrees Celsius in many parts of Korea under sunny skies nationwide. It looks like we might be saying goodbye to lovely cherry blossoms a little sooner than we'd hoped, as weekend rain looks like it could be quite heavy for a spring shower. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
How to survive in Korea. Cafes. Step 1. Find a seat. Before ordering, find a seat. Laptop ID, smartphone, jacket, whatever that can mark your territory. But no bites. It's a little too big. Step 2. Pick up. We do not ask or call your name. We call out, B69번 고객님. The buzzer will vibrate when your order is ready at the counter. Wait, got your straw? Keep the top of the wrapper on. Doing this is more hygienic. Step 3. Cafe etiquette. If you need to use your laptop, find a seat next to a socket. No extra charge for using electricity. But if you're staying over 3 hours, how about ordering another drink or dessert? Step 4. Last bite standing. There's a mysterious custom in Korea. The last bite standing. When there's about 1 bite left of that cake, nobody will go for it. You might be tempted, but don't be hasty. Right before you get up, take the last piece, saying that you simply can't waste food, or just leave it. It will save a few calories. Did you survive at the cafe? Did someone behind the counter catch your eye? Go for the same drink every single day.
오늘도 아이스 말차 라떼 드실 거죠?
You might make an impression.
Your gateway to Korea, simply K-pop. Hello, I'm your Simply MC Taewi of AB6. 사랑합니다.
And I'm your special MC for today, Alicia of Eunice. Nice to meet you.
week's Simply K-pop gateway to Korea. Don't miss out!
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. South Korea is navigating a complex moment for its economy and markets. Following the impeachment ruling on former President Yoon Suk-yeol, the nation saw a brief dip in the $1 exchange rate and a slight easing of market volatility, reflecting hopes that domestic uncertainty might begin to fade. But that window of calm has been narrow. A fresh wave of global trade tensions sparked by the Trump administration's announcement of 34% reciprocal tariffs on China has reignited concerns across global markets. Beijing has responded with matching tariffs, and the Korean won has now climbed back to above 1460 against the dollar, with some analysts warning of further upside pressure. All of this comes just ahead of a snap presidential election scheduled within 60 days, adding another layer of potential volatility. To help us understand what these overlapping events mean for South Korea's economy, markets, and policy direction, we're joined by Lee Eun-soo, Professor of Economics at Seoul University, here in the studio with us. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us online is Min-ju Kang, Senior Economist at ING. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start a discussion with Professor Lee. So like I've mentioned, President Yoon's impeachment ruling was seen as a potential resolution to one of the biggest recent domestic political uncertainties in the nation. In your view, how has this affected South Korea's economy so far?
Yeah, so the Constitutional Court's ruling helped reduce some political uncertainty. Right after the decision, markets reacted positively. The Korean won gained some strength, and the Kospi index recovered. I think foreign investors also became a bit more stable. But this effect was only limited. Investors remain very cautious because the country is still in a political transition. I think what's more serious is the growing external challenges you mentioned at the beginning. The U.S. recently imposed 25 tariffs on Korean exports like cars and electronics, and we don't have the former president, and with only the acting president, it is very difficult for Korea to respond through the trade talks or diplomacy. So consumers in Korea, the confidence is very weak. They cut a lot of consumption, and there are also limits to fiscal policy. The tax revenues are below expectation, and political conflict is blocking the proposed supplementary budget. So overall, the ruling brought some relax in the short term, but Korea's economy still faces major risk.
Right, so it only provided some short-term relief. We'll have to see the bigger picture from now. Now, let's also bring in Ms. Kang to the conversation. So looking back at the impeachments of Roh Moo-hyun and Park Geun-hye, what financial market trends typically followed such kind of political events? And in what ways does the current situation differ, especially considering today's global economic environment?
Well, I think the look back at what has happened in the past is not going to tell what will happen this time, because economic and political situation is different from the past. Financial market in general are not fond of any uncertainty. So if we just only focus on the fact that, the largest domestic political uncertainty has removed, the market should welcome the news. However, but the thing is that, compared to the past two impeachments, we think that, the political divide is much more deeper. And this is not just a Korea-specific issue, it's more of a global phenomena. And because of this deep division, is a root of protectionism and populism, and thus the division is often create market jitters more easily. So we believe that even if the President Yoon was formally exited, actually the market reaction to it, market rally was very short-lived. This is telling the market that they are going to have more uncertainty ahead. We are going to have a new president in less than 2 months. However, this is going to open another door of uncertainty, and we believe that this ongoing uncertainties around this election and the market will kind of be on the more roller coaster ride, heavily depending on how the U.S. trade policy develops.
Right, so the domestic and geopolitical situation is quite different from the past. Now, following the latest ruling, Professor Lee, the $1 exchange rate briefly dipped to 14.30, suggesting a momentarily a relief, but it quickly surged back above 14.70 due to global tensions. What does this sharp reversal tell us about the relative impact of domestic political stabilization versus external economic shocks?
So about the importance of whether it is domestic shock is larger or external shock is larger, I concur with Ms. Kang Min-ju that external shock matters in this case. As you briefly mentioned, that the $1 exchange rate rose to around 1,430 after the impeachment ruling, but within a few days, the won weakened again, closing at over 1,480. This shock, this quick reversal highlights how strongly external shocks are driving the Korean market right now. The key reason, obviously, is the U.S. decision to impose new tariffs, 25% to Korean goods like cars and electronics. And South Korea, is a highly export-oriented economy, and the U.S. is one of our most important trade partners. So these measures had a direct and significant impact. And I don't think this is whether domestic or external. In this case, the external shock was simply much larger in scale, and the market focused more on the global trade risk than on domestic stabilization. And especially the case for the won. Won is very risk-sensitive currency, and when there is a global uncertainty, investors tend to sell the Korean or emerging market currencies and move to safe haven assets like the U.S. or Japan. This put additional pressure on the won.
Right, so we can't really weigh in which one is more impactful. Both of them are very sensitive, has sensitive impacts to the market. Now, the 1470 level has been breached, Ms. Kang, with markets eyeing on the psychological threshold of 1,500. How do you assess the risk of the Korean won crossing that line, and what short-term triggers should we be paying attention to?
Actually, the global risk, sentiment, market sentiment is easily swayed by the, U.S. Trump's, tariff policy and actually its reaction. Chinese reaction to it. And it's like, the global market is watching on the, standing on the sideline, biting their nails and, watching these two giants fighting each other. It's not entertaining at all. And this is going to be the main trigger factor for, not only just Korean won and also in FX, a global FX market. I think, one thing is clear, the Korean won will be more volatile in the near term, given the nature of Korean won's, being a, high beta currency. And we also give a more trading range. It has to be very wide. We believe that between 1425 to 1500 is possible. On the upside, actually, yes, like you said, it is very critical level, 1500. However, the smoothing operation by the FX authorities may slow down the depreciation pace. However, it will not change the direction of the move. And also, we are going to see more of this, trade tension escalating, then probably can trigger, a hit the 1500 level. On the downside, actually, it is more capped. Because thinking about, the negative yield gap between Korea and the U.S. and our large export exposure to the U.S. and uncertainty surrounding, this tariff negotiations, these all factors, probably because of these all factors, the Korean won would not easily go down, to the 1425 level.
Right. So in the meantime, it would be very volatile, and we will have to keep close tabs on how it moves. Now, in response to all of this, Professor Lee, South Korea's top economic policymakers have convened F4 meetings. For those unfamiliar with what happened, could you walk us through the key points of their action plan?
Yeah, so the F4 meeting refers to Finance 4. That's a regularly closed meeting between the top economic and financial officials, including the Deputy Prime Minister, the Bank of Korea Governor, Financial Services Commission Chair, and the head of the FSS, the Financial Supervisory Service. So this is English word is familiar to Korean people because it has a reference to the popular Korean drama Boys Over Flowers. So here F stands for finance, not the flower. These are all male government officials. So after the U.S. announced 25% tariff on Korean exports, the F4 member quickly met to assess the risk and stabilize the market. And Deputy Prime Minister Choi Sang-mok stated that government is ready to act if volatility increases through liquidity support, FX measures, and other stabilization tools. And the government unveiled a package of more than 2 trillion won. That's about $1.5 billion US in policy financing to industry that are impacted by the recent US tariff imposition. So also they also launched a 24-hour joint monitoring system across markets, and in the long term they prepare for the trade negotiation with the US and industry specific support, including and they also have 10 trillion won supplementary budget to handle export shocks and supply chain disruptions. So government is trying to remedy such a in quick response to such a large external shock.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for breaking that down, Professor Lee. It's good to know how the government is trying to work to stabilize the situation. Now to Ms. Kang, as an economic expert, now that we've heard all of this, do you think these measures by the F4 were adequate to restore market confidence, or is there a need for more proactive and sustained steps in the near term?
Yes, well, those measures may help a bit. However, I don't think it is strong enough to restore the market confidence yet. Partially because the biggest risk is not from, it's from the external end, which is out of control of, probably our measures. But at least we should tackle internal, issues like this political gridlock should be resolved. And, there's two major parties have not reached an agreement on, supplementary budget for more than 2 months. And, prompt and timely, policy response is very important when this growth condition is softening and weakening. So we believe that, this kind of policy support is actually needed. However, unfortunately, we will have to wait for more, sustained and coherent policy support until after this election. And also depends on the election result. The government, policy stance will be very different from what we have now.
Right, so we'll really have to see how the results fall in on the South Korea's upcoming elections. Now, we've been talking about the Trump administration's tariff policies, of course, with reciprocal 34% tariffs already imposed in China and more are being threatened. How do you think this would, this new round of trade conflict would affect South Korea's export-dependent economy?
Actually, Trump paused this, 25% tariff. And, we are going to have more blanket 10% tariff. Korea's total exposure to U.S. import is about 8% of GDP. So with very simple calculation of, applying this 10% tariff, which means that, it will risk about 1% of our GDP. However, the cars and steels are still under, higher tariffs for now. And for now, some semiconductors and farmers are excluded from the tariff. However, this is likely to be included. Then, probably the negative impact should be much larger than, this estimated 1% of GDP number. But fortunately now, Korea has a secured seat at the negotiation tables with the U.S. administration. From now on, it's going to more be important how this negotiation will evolves. Probably the Trump administration is like to tackle this issue as a package deal. So they want to deal with not only just tariff issue but also other issues together. So they're going to request more direct investment from South Korea to U.S. and they want more imports of, U.S. goods, including, LNG and agricultural products, and also probably more spending in the U.S. troops in Korea. So this is going to be, have, lots of requests that, but, we are not sure how much of that we can, meet their request. But, I don't know, you have seen this, the message from the White House official, SNS, they said, do not retaliate. You will be rewarded. So hopefully we have a small hope that at the end the actual tariff will be imposed to Korea is likely to be more relaxed than what we see now.
Let's hope for some leeway on that front. Now, looking ahead, Professor Lee, a snap presidential election, like we've been talking about, will take place in less than 2 months. How much additional uncertainty do you think this would have on South Korea's markets? And what kind of policies would investors be more keen to in terms of the next administration's economic policies?
Okay, the upcoming snap presidential election scheduled for June the 3rd. There is another layer of uncertainty to the Korean economy, unfortunately. While Democratic Party candidate currently appears dominant, public sentiment remains sharply divided. According to the polls, this candidate has about 30% support, but 37% of respondents say that they dislike this person the most. So the combination of low approval and high disapproval reflects the deep polarization in Korea, both in the National Assembly and among the public. So even if the dominant party wins, the presidency and dominant party win the presidency and holds a parliamentary majority, investors are not necessarily expecting smooth policy making. About the next administration's economic policy direction, there's particular concern about whether the next administration will pursue business-friendly policies. Structural reforms such as labor market adjustment or regulatory changes is necessary to boost innovation and productivity. That's very important for the long-term growth. But given the current political climate, there is uncertainty over whether such reforms can pass through the National Assembly. So this kind of uncertainty raises a big risk to the Korean market, whether the new government will come in 2 months of the time.
Right, so election results will definitely add another layer of uncertainty to the situation. Now, considering all of these developments, domestic political shifts, global trade tensions, currency volatility, Ms. Kang, what's your overall outlook for South Korea's economic trajectory in the second half of the year? Are we heading into a more stable phase, or should we be bracing for more turbulence?
It's really tough question. We market economists make forecasts for a living. However, we do it based on a lot of assumptions and based on logical reasoning and thinking, from all sort of the data we collect. But now, these things can be easily thrown away by just one person. So it's very difficult to predict. However, I try my best to estimate this impact on the Korean economy. We expect the Korean GDP to grow less than 1% this year. We had thought that probably the second quarter would be the bottom, assuming that this reciprocal tariff came into effect on April 9th. However, it changed. So maybe there's 3 months of leeway. We may see more extent of this front loading of more goods will be shipped to the U.S. at least until for second quarter. However, it's going to be more like a technical payback. We are expecting in third quarter, and also already just 10% of tariffs already imposed. And also cars, steel, and aluminums, and farmers, and all these major export items will be included. Then it's going to have more negative impact on Korean export anyway. And also rising uncertainty will hurt the sentiment of business and consumers, and this will eventually weaken the global demand of Korean goods. So if we consider these two factors, actually, we believe that we are going to have a very sluggish growth for the second half of this year. However, one hope that we have is that macro policies. We believe that not just monetary policy, but also fiscal policy will turn more accommodative to support the growth, and this is coming regardless of the the election result. However, the thing is that we have to wait until for more than less than the two months to this political vacuum situation get resolved. So this is quite difficult situation for Korea for this year. And actually, we don't know how this tariff negotiation will evolve. So still the downside risk is still quite high.
Right, so a difficult situation ahead, but thank you so much for shedding light on the bright side as well. We will have to wrap up our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Lee.
Thank you.
And Ms. Kang, of course, we appreciate it. Now, this wraps up our program for tonight. Thank you for being with us and Within the Frame, and be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.
How to survive in Korea. Workplace. Step 1. Lunchtime. The most important morning routine is to check today's menu. Food is essential for survival. Memorize today's menu. The